Hello, everybody. I am Ameya Ketkar, a PhD student at Oregon State University, presenting my research on understanding type changes in Java. As developers, we have to keep evolving our code to make it more understandable, more efficient, or just to adapt to the new requirements. To do so, we use the refactoring tools that are readily available to us in our IDEs. Sometimes we also perform changes that are not automated by the IDEs. For example, since Java deprecated some classes in its datetime library, I decided to update my code to use the new API. One of the changes involved changing the type in a local variable from simple date format to a datetime formatter. Because of this, I had to adapt the right hand side of the adaptation from the new class expression to a static method call. I had to further propagate this change to another local variable d by performing another type change from date to local date. Basically, a type change is a transformation where the type of a local variable, a field, a method parameter, or a method return type is updated, and then the other parts of the source code are adapted to propagate the type constraints of the new type. There are many reasons to perform a type change. Let's say a developer wants to migrate their logging infrastructure from Apache Commons log to SLF4j logger, or you want to perform an API update like I showed in the previous slide. Maybe we want to improve the performance by adopting the string builder over the string, or introduce abstraction by using list instead of array list. Type changes can also be used if you want to change the property. For example, you want to use a deck over a linked list or a set over a map, or introduce concurrency by using concurrent hash map over hash map, or simply for maintainability, like sometimes the type path may be a more conceptual representation of a value than a string. Now that we know what are type changes and why they are performed, let's look at the state of the current tool support and research. The state of the practice IDEs like IntelliJ, Eclipse, and NetBeans provide very minimal support to perform type changes when compared to other refactorings. They provide features like use supertype when possible, infer generic type argument, generalized declared type. IntelliJ and Eclipse also provide some support in form of change method signature and type migration. However, these tools can only do the one part of the type change, that is changing the declared type, but not adapt the references. We recently developed a tool too, T2R, for performing type migrations in ultra large scale code bases. It was used to perform performance based type changes in the Google's code base of 300 million lines of code. There is also a huge body of work based on developing refactoring tools using type constraints. Researchers have also performed empirical studies to understand the nature of software evolution tasks like library migration and API updates. These tasks also often perform type changes, but these studies do not study type change in a general context. Until now, we've seen that type changes are prevalent and that there are many reasons to perform a type change. There is also some tooling and research around type changes. Our goal is to bridge this knowledge gap between the current state of research and tooling and the practice in the real world. For this purpose, we answer 6 research questions like how often are type changes performed? Do type changes warrant more automation than the current tool support and research? What are the most common and popular type changes? Are the current tools able to perform these? How are the references adapted? Can the current tools be extended to perform these kinds of adaptations? Are the current tools representative of the type changes that are performed in practice? Do developers perform type changes in a migration mode or in a more selective fashion? That is, do they migrate all the elements of a particular type or only a selected few? Understanding this will be important for tool builders and researchers to further advance the automation of the manual and laborious tasks that developers perform. Our answers to the research questions have implications for researchers. Currently, they lack the understanding of type changes and the role it plays in software evolution. Our results can enhance their understanding and support for higher level tasks such as library updates, library migration, or even automatic program repair that are composed from type changes. Tool builders can gain insight into the practice of type changes. They can automate the most commonly applied ones that we identified and explore our dataset to identify new uh, opportunities for developing automation techniques. Language and library designers continuously evolve the types that they expose to their clients. They can make more informed decisions about evolving their library if they can have an insight into what are the most common types that their clients use and how they evolve the usage of these types. To investigate the type changes performed in practice, we designed a study with 129 high quality Java 8 projects from GitHub containing 400,000 commits. We extended refactoring to analyze these commits and identify the type changes performed in these commits. We also developed a novel tool called TypeFactMiner to extract fine-grained details from these type changes. We mined details like the type binding and the hierarchy information of the types evolved in the type change without building the code. We then collected 300,000 type changes by analyzing these commits. We used this data set to answer our 6 research questions. The biggest challenge in detecting type changes is detecting it accurately and at a large scale. A commit involves other refactorings like move, rename, extract of method, classes, and interfaces. This can obfuscate the detection of type changes. Moreover, if one wants to perform a large scale study, analyzing all the files at each version of the project is just not feasible. So one must identify a type change just from the changed files in the commit. For this purpose, we extended refactoring miner to detect the type changes in a more refactoring aware manner. To gain an in-depth insight into the practice of type changes, we have to understand the exact types that were involved in the type change. Sometimes a type with the same name can be present in two different libraries. For example, datetime formatter type is offered by both Java and by Joda. But to do so, one has to resolve the type bindings, and for that, one would have to build the code and get this information from the compiler. Practically, we cannot build 500,000 commits, that too from 100 projects. So, we developed a tool called TypeFactMiner for this purpose. It can accurately and efficiently detect the types of the elements across the version history of a project. Refactoring Miner has the state of the art refactoring aware statement matching algorithm between two Java ASTs. We leverage this to add a new feature to Refactoring Miner to detect 4 kinds of type changes: change local variable type, change method parameter type, change field type, and change method return type. A type change instance that a refactoring miner reports consists of two components: the change declared type of the element and the adaptations performed on the references of the element within the lexical scope. In this example, we will detect that the declared type of f was changed from function double double to double unary operator, and that the method invocation name was updated to apply as double. To evaluate the accuracy of refactoring miner and to detect type changes, we created a ground truth of 1843 type changes. We manually validated refactoring miner to have 99.7% precision and 95% recall. Analyzing only the syntactic differences between the AST nodes in a type change is not enough to correctly detect a type change. For example, we would want to identify here if in the before code the type optional referred to Java's optional or Google Commons optional. Because if it referred to Java's optional, this is not really a type change. Here the developer just decided to use a fully qualified name of the type. TypeFactMiner can infer this kind of type information of an element at any version in the commit history without requiring to build the code or even having to analyze the entire source code. To accurately and efficiently infer type information, TypeFactMiner employs heuristics which infer the type of the element based on its context. It reasons about the import statements, the type declarations, the type hierarchy, and the package structure. The main challenge is to keep track of the types that are valid at a particular version in the project. A type can be internal, that is the one that is declared within the project. To keep track of such types, at the first version in the commit history, TypeFactMiner analyzes all the files in the project. But then on, it only analyzes the commit diff to keep track and keep on update incrementally keep track of the types declared in the project. To track the types declared in the external dependencies, TypeFactMiner analyzes the build file at a particular version of the project. It then identifies, downloads the exact version of the external library, and then extracts the type from these declared libraries, from these libraries. Moreover, it also has to infer the types declared in the standard Java library. To evaluate TypeFactMiner, we use the Eclipse compiler as a golden standard. We found that TypeFactMiner has a precision of 98.7%. Now we will look at some results from our study. To understand how common are type changes, we needed a baseline. While type change is not a refactoring per se, we chose rename to compare it with. This is because rename refactoring is the closest to type change in the sense that it can be also applied to a local variable, a field, a parameter, or a method. We can see that type changes are performed more often than renaming across all the kinds. This highlights the prevalence of type changes in practice. While it is so frequent, type changes have not enjoyed enough attention from researchers. It also has negligible automation compared to other refactorings like rename, move, or extract. We explore various characteristics of a type change. Understanding the visibility of an element on which a type change is performed is important. If a type change affects the signature of a package visible method, a developer should update all the call sites of a method within the same package. However, if the method is public visible, a developer should update all the call sites in the entire program. But more importantly, this type change could also introduce backward incompatibility for the clients of the library. Our analysis showed that the public elements are most frequently updated, but developers are cautious when applying them. Moreover, we found that 14% of these cases, the change introduced binary incompatibility while the source was compatible. We categorize program elements based on the relative location of the source and the target type with respect to the project under analysis. We fully we find the fully qualified name of the type using TypeFactMiner, and label is at internal JDK or external as I showed before. We assume that the developer can perform more easily a type change involving internal than external types as they are more familiar with the type defined internally in the project, or can also ask a co-developer in the project who has more expertise on the internal types. On the other hand, type changes involving external types are more difficult to perform as a developer needs to study the external documentation which might be outdated, unavailable, or maybe go to like Stack Overflow and figure out more information. Developers most commonly perform type changes between internal types and between JDK types. We also observe that a type change between two external types happens seldomly, but when it happens as a mass migration. These internal to internal type changes are very custom to the project itself. That's why the most appropriate way until now is to use some sort of a DSL to express this change. Many previous tools propose a DSL for such purposes, but however, there are these DSLs are very awkward to use, and there could be more research to understand how could developers be assisted when performing internal type changes. Moreover, empirical studies on library migrations have completely ignored these kinds of internal type changes. Type changes involve two main parts, updating the declared type and updating the reference. Until now, we delved into the format part. We found that the most frequent change done along with a type change is a rename. In 54% of the cases, when the type was changed, the element was renamed to. For example, here when the type was changed from string to file, the variable was also renamed from file path to file. The next most frequent adaptation was adapting the call sites by renaming method invocations, adding, removing, modifying arguments, wrapping expressions, or adding or removing method chains. Next, we found that 20% of the adaptations required one to do another type change. I had shown this kind of example in one of the previous slide where the developer wanted to migrate from simple date format to date time formatter, and hence also had to perform another type change from date to local date. This highlights that IDE should provide support for advanced composite refactorings which perform type changes and adapt the code referring to it. While current IDEs support refactorings like type change signature and type migration, these tools could also adapt the references. Maybe the tool builders could just start by adapting by implementing the most frequently applied adaptation patterns. We next investigated, are the source and target types of the type change related by hierarchy or by composition. We found that 27% of the type changes are related by hierarchy, of which 85% of them were siblings, and 7% are by composition. We then tried to understand the impact of this relationship on the references adapted. Violin plot here shows the adaptation ratio. It is the number of statements that were adapted to the total number of candidate statements. We found that more source code needs to be adapted when the types are related by composition. However, we also saw that these changes are very repetitive, like adding a getter. This shows opportunities for tool builders to automate type changes when the types have a composition relation, just like when they have a parent-child relation. Currently, researchers have developed very specific techniques for changing between sibling types like hash maps to concurrent hash maps. In our dataset, we observe that changing between sibling types is very common. There could be more general technique that could allow developers to express changes between types like lists and sets. We finally investigate in what mode does the user apply these type changes, a selective or a migration. That is, are particular elements of a particular type updated, or are all elements of a particular type updated? We found that in 61.7% of the cases, developers perform type changes in a more selective fashion than a migration fashion. And that too, when they perform a type migration, they usually involve internal types. This highlights a big blind spot in the current tooling, which focuses on creating type and class migration tools for JDK types. Moreover, it will also be very interesting to understand what motivates a developer to apply a type change in a selective or a migration manner. Now I will spend some time describing our dataset and how to navigate it. Our dataset consists of 130 projects. For each project, we report the details about the commit and the type changes applied in the commit history. For each commit, we track information like all the refactorings performed, all the signatures of the external libraries required by the project at that commit, whether any library was updated or migrated. We found over 100,000 commits containing hundreds and thousands of refactorings. Our dataset contains all those instances. The main focus of our dataset is to showcase the type changes. Let's explore the most popular type changes that we found. One can filter these based on their names, their characteristics like visibility of the element, is it an internal type change, an external type change, does it involve primitive types, and so on. One can also see the details like how were the references adapted when the type change was performed. Like here you can see that to perform the type change from atomic long to long adder, the method invocations had to be renamed. Our dataset contains the link to the exact line on GitHub. If you are interested in exploring library migrations, these type migrations that we identified will interest you. We have this entire dataset accessible to public on our website. You can also download the raw dataset from our project's GitHub page. Now I will discuss some open problems. We believe that our dataset and tooling can be used as a starting point to solve these problems. Type changes are so frequently performed that they really warrant automation. Our dataset can be used as a starting point to identify the most common and popular type changes that could be automated. Since our dataset contains details about the type changes performed when a particular library was updated or migrated, it could be interesting. It could be used to understand the role a type change plays in software evolution. It would be also interesting to explore the interplay between type changes and other refactorings, especially rename, extract, and pull up. Our dataset can also be used as a starting point to create a recommendation system for type changes. To summarize, we mined 300,000 type changes from 400,000 commits in 129 projects. We extended refactoring miner to detect type changes and developed the novel TypeFactMiner to infer type information. We validated both tools to show their high accuracy and efficiency. We used the dataset collected by these tools to answer 6 research questions. Our key findings were that type changes are very common, even more common than renaming. Performing cascading type change is a very common practice, and developers perform type change in a more selective fashion. We discuss the implications of our results for researchers, tool builders, and language designers. Our paper, the tool, and the dataset can be found on our companion website. Thank you.